Wasn't it acted upon and used routinely?
Great question, right?
Sadly, the remedy for scurvy, though proven, seems to have not been recognized or believed. A widely held theory blames scurvy on a diet of either too much salted meat or not enough fresh meat, rather than a lack of fresh fruit and vegetables. Also, there was a logistical problem. It was difficult to keep fresh citrus fruit or juice for weeks at a time.
Right.
Attempts were made to concentrate and preserve lemon juice, but such procedures were time-consuming, costly, and perhaps not very effective, as we now know that vitamin C is easily destroyed by heat and light, and that long-term storage reduces the amount in fruits and vegetables. Because of expense and inconvenience, naval officers, physicians, the British Admiralty, and ship owners could see no way of growing sufficient greens or citrus fruit on heavily manned vessels. Precious cargo space would have to be used for this purpose. Fresh or preserved citrus fruit was expensive, especially if it was to be allocated daily as a preventive measure. Economy and the profit margin ruled. Although, in hindsight, it does seem that this was a false economy. Ships had to be manned above capacity to allow for a 30, 40, or even 50% death rate from scurvy. Even without a high death rate, the effectiveness of a crew suffering from scurvy would have been remarkably low. And then there was the humane factor, rarely considered during these centuries.
173.
Another element was the intransigence of the average crew. They were used to eating the standard ship's fare, and although they complained about the monotonous diet of salt meat and ship's biscuit when they were at sea, what they wanted in port was lots of fresh meat, fresh bread, cheese, butter, and good beer. Even if fresh fruit and vegetables were available, the majority of the crew would not have been interested in a quick stir-fry of tender, crunchy greens. They wanted meat and more meat, boiled, stewed, or roasted. The officers, who generally came from a higher social class, where a wider and more varied diet was common, would have found eating fruit and vegetables in port to be normal and probably highly acceptable. It would not have been unusual for them to be interested in trying exotic new foodstuffs to be found in the locales where they made landfall. Tamarinds, limes, and other fruits high in vitamin C would have been used in the local cuisine that they, unlike the crew, might try. Scurvy was thus usually less of a problem among a ship's officers.
Now, like any good scientific essay, we're going to have a lot of interesting cause and effect discussions, right? Notice in this section, and it's somewhat of a lengthy section, but our authors have tried to walk us through the challenges of A, understanding what scurvy was, B, trying to find some kind of preventative measures, C, explaining why those preventative measures were not actually put into practice. The irony of all ironies is that for quite some time, notice, we knew the solution to the problem, and yet still we did not actually pursue the preventative measures. By the way, this debate still rages on today. Just at 3A, you might want to write this down. There's a guy whose last name is Greger, G-R-E-G-E-R, who's written a very interesting book. You may want to Google this one, called How Not to Die. And in this text, he actually argues that humans could actually live longer and more healthier if they would remove most meat, if not all meat, from their diet and return back to what specifically is mentioned here, fresh fruits and vegetables. By the way, finally, notice on page 173 that the officers, who typically came from a more upper class socioeconomically, were more accustomed to eating fruit. and vegetables, and therefore when they put into port, they were very quickly able to spend time eating, right, the vegetables and fruits. However, our normal sailors would be more accustomed to, I want some meat to eat, and therefore would maybe not even pay much attention to fruits and vegetables. Let's pause at 3b and ask really quickly for you, how many of you would report that you eat quite a bit of fruits and vegetables? How many of you say, not interested in fruits and vegetables? In fact, fruits and vegetables, I would prefer to have other kinds of things, maybe meat, maybe processed cuisine. Somebody like Dr. Greger will make the argument that that is a lifestyle choice you may want to seriously investigate. We now turn to our second major heading of this reading. I'm on page 173. Cook, hundreds, scurvy, nil. Let's take a look and see now as we continue with what really is a scientific history document essay, isn't it? Watch.
Cook, hundreds, scurvy, nil. James Cook of the British Royal Navy was the first ship's captain to ensure that his crews remained scurvy-free. Cook is sometimes associated with the discovery of anti-scorbutics, as scurvy-curing foods are called. But his true achievement lay in the fact that he insisted on maintaining high levels of diet and hygiene aboard all his vessels. The result of his meticulous standards was an extraordinarily good level of health and a low mortality rate among his crew. Cook entered the Navy at the relatively late age of 27, but his previous 9 years of experience sailing as a merchant seaman mate in the North Sea and the Baltic, his intelligence, and his innate seamanship combined to ensure his rapid promotion within the naval ranks. His first experience with scurvy came aboard the Pembroke in 1758 on his initial voyage across the Atlantic Ocean to Canada to challenge the French hold on the St. Lawrence River. Cook was alarmed by the devastation this common affliction caused and appalled that the deaths of so many crew, the dangerous reduction of working efficiency, and even actual loss of ships were generally accepted as inevitable. His experience exploring and mapping around Nova Scotia, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and Newfoundland, and his accurate observations of the eclipse of the sun greatly impressed the Royal Society, a body founded in 1645 with the aim of improving natural knowledge. He was granted command of the ship Endeavour and instructed to explore and chart the southern oceans, to investigate new plants and animals, and to make astronomical observations of the transit of planets across the sun.
Page 174.
Less known, but nonetheless compelling reasons for this voyage and for Cook's subsequent later voyages were political. Taking possession in the name of Britain of already discovered lands, claiming of new lands still to be discovered, including Terra Australis Incognita, the great southern continent, and the hopes of finding a northwest passage were all on the minds of the Admiralty. That Cook was able to complete so many of these objectives depended to a large degree on ascorbic acid.
Interesting line.
Consider the scenario on June 10, 1770, when the Endeavour ran aground on coral of the Great Barrier Reef, just south of present-day Cooktown in northern Queensland, Australia. It was a near catastrophe. The ship had struck at high water. A resulting hole in the hull necessitated drastic measures. In order to lighten the ship, the entire crew heaved overboard everything that could be spared. For 23 hours straight, they manned the pumps as seawater leaked inexorably into the hold, hauling desperately on cables and anchor in an attempt to plug the hole by fothering, a temporary method of mending a hole by drawing a heavy sail under the hull. Incredible effort, superb seamanship, and good fortune prevailed. The ship eventually slid off the reef and was beached for repairs. It had been a very close call, one that an exhausted, scurvy-inflicted crew could not have summoned the energy to answer. A healthy, well-functioning crew was essential for Cook to accomplish what he did on his voyages. This fact was recognized by the Royal Society when it awarded him its highest honor, the Copley Gold Medal, not for his navigational feats, but for his demonstration that scurvy was not an inevitable companion on long ocean voyages. Cook's methods were simple. He insisted on maintaining cleanliness throughout the ship, especially in the tight confines of the seamen's quarters. All hands were required to wash their clothes regularly, to air and dry their bedding when the weather permitted, to fumigate between decks, and in general, to live up to the meaning of the term ship shape. When it was not possible to obtain the fresh fruit and vegetables he thought necessary for a balanced diet, he required that his men eat the sauerkraut he had included in the ship's provisions. Cook touched land at every possible opportunity to replenish stores and gather local grasses, celery grass, scurvy grass, or plants from which he brewed teas.
Page 175.
This diet was not at all popular with the crew, accustomed as they were to the standard seaman's fare and reluctant to try anything new. But Cook was adamant. He and his officers also adhered to this diet, and it was by his example, authority, and determination that his regimen was followed. There's no record that Cook had anyone flogged for refusing to eat sauerkraut or celery grass, but the crew knew the captain would not hesitate to prescribe the lash for opposing his rules. Cook also made use of a more subtle approach. He records that a sauerkraut prepared from local plants was initially made available only to the officers. Within a week, the lower ranks were clamoring for their share. Success no doubt helped convince Cook's crew that their captain's strange obsession with what they ate was worthwhile. Cook never lost a single man to scurvy.
Amazing,
On his
right?
first voyage of almost 3 years, 1/3 of his crew died after contracting malaria or dysentery in Batavia, now Jakarta, in the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia. On his second voyage, from 1772 to 1775, he lost 1 member of his crew to illness, but not to scurvy.
176.
Yet on that trip, the crew of his companion vessel was badly affected by the problem. The commander, Tobias Furneaux, was severely reprimanded and instructed yet again by Cook on the need for preparation and administration of anti-scorbutics. Thanks to vitamin C, the ascorbic acid molecule, Cook was able to compile an impressive list of accomplishments: the discovery of the Hawaiian Islands and the Great Barrier Reef, the first circumnavigation of New Zealand, the first charting of the coast of the Pacific Northwest, and first crossing of the Antarctic Circle.
And actually, when you visit New Zealand and you are there on the southern tip of the North Island, you'll be looking out onto what's called the Cook Straits. Cook, of course, very influential in the history of the world. And yet also, from this essay we learn, very informed about, can we say it this way at 2A? One of the major messages of this essay is, what you've heard many times before, you are what you eat. Whoa! You are what you eat. That is to say, nutrition actually does matter. And this is, of course, one of the kind of interesting messages of an essay like this. What else at 2A are you going to write down? Well, obviously, another major potential message here is simply that challenges often give way to solutions that change the way we think about the world. A third possible message is this one. Just because people know there is a solution does not necessarily mean that they will in fact appropriate or go for that solution. It's interesting how often in the history of the world, solutions are not the answer, tragically, is a mantra. And here, of course, we saw this available to us as well, right? Let's jump to 2B really quickly. What is the author's purpose here? I think there's probably 2 things we want to say for your notes right away. One, obviously, we as readers, we are very much interested in the history right? That is to say, the ways and the connections within history, especially as it relates to that moment in world history when men began to get on ships and sail out into the ocean far, far away, right? Necessity in some way required that we had to find solutions to serious problems like scurvy. Number two, it's clear from a reading like this as well that one of the serious purposes to our authors is to try to suggest that nutrition really does matter. That you really need to think about the stuff that you put into your body or you don't put into your body to take care of yourself. Because of course as you age, you're going to begin to really think more seriously about things like nutrition. How about 3A? What is for you your favorite text about ships sailing out on the ocean, for example? What is your favorite text that has anything to do with issues of nutrition and or, how about this, the very idea of finding solutions to illnesses or diseases or whatever and the ways in which that happen? What's your favorite text in that regards? Okay. Finally, let's ask it 3B, what is your relationship to nutrition, to diet? Of course, we should say it out loud. Diet is not something that you go on or you don't go on. Diet is everything you eat, or maybe we would say at times, you don't eat. This text seems to suggest we might want to pay attention to that, and of course to issues of vitamins and the like, and of course vitamin C here being celebrated. It's a fascinating question as well as at 3B. We'll go ahead and ask it. Is there one thing in your diet that you know is probably not very healthy for you, but you continue to do it? And secondly, at what point in your life can you remember starting to think at all consciously of the things you are eating, that is to say, putting into your body? And if you, for example, do find that you are often not feeling well or you're ill often, maybe paying attention to your diet might make sense. Again, you can go to a website like nutritionfacts.org, which is Dr. Greger's online site available, where he does make quite a few arguments about you really need to consider seriously your diet and your nutrition and pay attention. We often say, especially if you're an athlete, but we would probably want to say to sophomores, it doesn't matter whether you're an athlete or not, you need to take care of your body because, of course, there's a connection between your body and your mind, no doubt. Well, there you go, a fascinating bit of history, science. I hope maybe it helped you to be able to read something like this as well. Thank you.